Today on Nova Legends podcast, I got Benita Fitzgerald Mosley, who won a gold medal in the 110 hurdles in the '84 Olympics, the second American to win that event, a gold medal in that event after Babe Dickerson, and the first African American to win it. She's a local product from Gar-Field High School in Prince William County, suburban Northern Virginia. She ran track at the University of Tennessee, powerful program, of course. And after her track career, she's having a great career as an executive, doing numerous things, also some nonprofit work, giving back to the community. So thanks for doing this, Benita.
Happy to be here.
Great. So I see right away you're from Warrenton and Dale City. So how long did you spend in Warrenton, which is, for folks not from the DC area, Warrenton's about 50 miles west of Washington, DC.
No time at all. I was only born there. Just the time I guess I spent in the hospital. There was no hospital in Prince William County when I was born.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so I was, my mom had to go to Fauquier County Hospital to give birth.
Wow. Yeah. So people who
don't know Manassas, Virginia, until I was 8, and then we moved to Dale City when it was brand new, just being developed, and they built a house in Darby-Dale in Dale City.
Right. Well, where you have a street named after you now. But it's interesting. You're talking about the hospital. Prince William County, when I was growing up, was country. I mean, the suburbs were growing. It was building. The schools were getting bigger. They're building more schools. But it was country to us. I lived in Fairfax near George Mason University. And it's amazing, that area now. It's just an extension of Fairfax County.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the second largest county in the state, and I guess it always has been, probably population wise, but like you said, it's such a large landmass, our county, that it's kind of hard to fill it up. So yes, I live on the western side of the county, which really was very underdeveloped until probably the early 2000s, and when Dominion Valley Country Club, where I live now, was first being built, in Lake Manassas and Piedmont. A bunch of golf course communities have been built out here. And as a result, now we have our own hospital just a mile from my house. We have all kinds of stores and shopping and restaurants, and it's a whole new world. I guess the 13th high school in Prince William County was just opened, Gainesville High School, this past year. All of these schools are overcrowded even when they're built. They have 3,000 kids in a piece in Prince William County. So yeah, it's growing. It has grown quite a bit since I've been here.
Yeah, I was at Gar-Field High School for a soccer game on Tuesday, and it was just amazing. I mean, it's very much urban, that part of the county. They have incredible soccer talent there. But getting back to your day, getting started in sports. How did you get started in sports and track and field specifically?
I was very fortunate to grow up in Prince William County when I did. As you know, Title IX is celebrating its 50th anniversary on June 23rd, so just around the corner. And Prince William County was always a pretty progressive county and adopted the kind of rules and opportunity to offer girls sports even before the law was passed. And so by the time I got to middle school in the early 70s, it was really wonderful because I had a plethora of sports to choose from. And so I had seen Olga Corbett and Nadia Comaneci compete in the Olympic Games and was inspired to be a gymnast. I'm not standing, but I'm 5'10", and not necessarily have the body to
they're 4'10"
compete in gymnastics, but I did anyway. Thankfully, the coach was Gwen Washington, and she has been a family friend. Her mom and my mom were part of this Courageous Four that integrated Prince William County schools in the mid-60s. And so Coach Washington came up to me and she said, Benita, I think you should come out for the track team. So this was 7th grade. And so I spent 6th grade being a gymnast and 7th grade and the fall. And then she said, yeah, track starts in the spring. You might want to try that. So I did. thankfully. And I won races the first time out. You know, she said, you beat all the boys in PE class, and I see how fast you are. I know you'll do well in this sport. I continued to do gymnastics through eighth grade, through middle school. Trust me, I wasn't very good. I'd get 4s and 5s on a scale of 1 to 10 on my uneven parallel bars routine. I couldn't do a, you know, handspring or back handspring or anything. So it was nice of her to keep me on the team, but I certainly found my calling when I ran track and field. I also was a musician in middle school, so I played flute and piccolo all through high school as well.
So what about your early track influences? And did you read about Wilma Rudolph and some of the great runners of the past?
She was the only one that I did read about, and I'm not sure how I got a poster of her, but it was up in my room, and I read some kind of biography or autobiography about her, the fact that she had been stricken with polio when she was younger, had to wear braces on her legs for a long period of time, and of course, ultimately became one of our best and most loved Olympic champions in the 60s. And when I read that autobiography, I saw a lot of her in me, and mainly that she was 5'10" and 132 pounds. And I thought, I'm 5'10", and I don't know, it's 125, 130, something like that in high school. And I thought, wow, she's just like me. And if she can run like that, I can too. It was just, if you can see it, you can be it. And I saw it in Wilma Rudolph and aspired to be just like her.
Well, who are some of your earliest coaches? Now, you're a hurdler. And so, someone had to identify your body type or the way you move as a hurdler, rather than a sprinter, because, obviously you have to be fast to be a hurdler.
I was both, actually.
You're both, okay. So who are some of your earliest coaches that identified your talent and put you in the right events?
Well, Gwen Washington gets the credit really for that early on, because she put me in the hurdles and in the 50-yard dash, I think we had to do then, in the 100-yard dash, and I ran on relays. I also did high jump. Wow. And so when I got to high school, I was doing all of those events and lots of relays as well. Early part of my high school, a woman named Ann Lockett was the head coach at Gar-Field. They had won 3 straight state championships before my freshman year. Mm-hmm. And then we won our 4th straight during my freshman year. Wow. I got to be on the team with a woman named the late great Paula Gervin. She passed away about a year ago, but we were dear friends all through high school. And her sister was a bit younger, so Paula was 3 years ahead of me. Marcia was 2 years ahead of me. Was a great basketball player, played D1 basketball, but she also was an amazing high jumper as well. So we hung out, and my families knew each other. They were part of, different organizations in town. Our parents were. And so to see Paula make the Olympic team as a senior in high school while I was a freshman, Ann Lockett, said to me after that Olympic trials, and I was after school one day, and she said, Benita, you can be on the Olympic team in 4 years. You're as talented as Paula. And so she identified that talent. She nurtured it. She gave me that kind of inspiration and motivation. And then again, if you can see it, you can be it. I saw it in Paula, a teammate, a friend, a neighbor, and was able to follow in her footsteps just 4 years later. And we were both on the 1980 Olympic team together. Unfortunately, we boycotted those games. President Carter did, and we did not get to go. We had a lot of wonderful festivities here in the United States, but we didn't. And we actually traveled to Europe to run a bunch of meets as well, but we didn't get to compete at the Moscow Olympics in '80. So Ann Lockett left after my freshman year, and she turned over the reins of the program to a woman named Ruthie Brown. And Ruthie continued to be my high school coach for the last 3 years. There was a guy named Mike Campbell who was the men's coach, and the two of them really worked together. A lot of the workouts that we did were the same, the boys and the girls. And I was very fortunate that they not only saw my talent, but nurtured it and exposed me to competitions that would allow me to get better and better at what I did. So by the time I was a junior, I started running for this club called the DC Striders. And they took me to the junior national championships. I'd never run any kind of post-season competition besides our state meet until that time. And I went to junior national championships, and I ended up winning and making the US junior national team. We went abroad to compete in Russia and Germany and England. And that was a direct result of my coaches sending me to the Milrose games and to meets in California and Texas and Philadelphia and Maryland, well beyond high school. These were open meets, so there were all kinds of amazing athletes competing, the best in the world, actually. And by the time I finished high school, I was ranked 5th in the country in the 100-meter hurdles.
Wow. How important to your success in track and beyond was the fact that you had so many female role models in your life, coaches and mentors and influences? That seems, for that 1970s, you called Prince William progressive. That seems to be a good bit of fortune that you had so many women in your life that were showing you the way.
Back then, pre-Title IX, and as Title IX was being passed, over 90% of women's or girls were coached by women. So girls and women's sports were coached by women. And as time has progressed, that's one of the things that has had an adverse impact, I guess, on women coaches and women administrators. The same was true of women administrators. If you were an athletic director at a college or high school, there was a women's athletic director that oversaw the women's sports, and that person was a female. Those positions now have very vast majority gone to men. We are underrepresented in the number of coaches of women's sports. So now we're under 50% of coaches of women's sports are women. And that's in high school, middle school, college, particularly. And same with administrators. As these athletic departments were combined, nine times out of 10, literally, the athletic director was a male. So we have certainly made great strides in sport and participation wise, but there are a lot of other aspects of Title IX that really haven't been upheld. Back to your question though, my mom was my first amazing role model. I alluded to her earlier as being one of the courageous 4 here in Prince William County that helped to integrate the public school system. You mentioned that I have a street named after me. Well, there's a school, Fannie W. Fitzgerald Elementary School, that's named for my mom, that sits at 15500 Benita Fitzgerald Drive. School named for my mom on the street that's named after me. And she was one of 4 teachers that the superintendent asked to go to 4 different all-white elementary schools and teach these kids for that year. It was the school year had already started. They were kind of tapped and asked to, report for work the next day. At that time, schools were completely segregated, and she and the others taught at an all-Black school called Antioch McCrae that was actually here in Haymarket, no longer exists. It was torn down quite a few years ago, but she and the 3 other teachers did an amazing job. And the following year, they definitely integrated the entire school system here in Prince William County. So I was a direct beneficiary of my mom's courageous efforts, as I only attended integrated schools when I was younger. So yes, it was my mom. It was her friends that were pillars of the community here in Prince William County as educators, administrators, community servants. My dad, of course, was my guidance counselor when I was in high school. He was a teacher and guidance counselor at Gar-Field High School for many, many years. And then I've only had women coaches, at least as head coaches of the programs. Even when I went to University of Tennessee, Terry Crawford was the head women's coach there, and she recruited me, and I went there, of course. The sprint coaches and the people who coached me in the hurdles in college were male, but Terry was always my friend, mentor, coach, and is today.
Yeah. Just real quickly about schools. This just occurred to me. You're talking about progressiveness of Prince William County. I think up in Fairfax County, we consider ourselves more progressive, but the reality is my aunt is a Deanna native, and she went to school at Jenny Dean High School in Manassas because there was no Black high school in Fairfax County until 1954.
Exactly right. So it was a boarding school. My dad was actually a dorm supervisor at Jenny Dean and teacher. And so, yes, all from Loudoun, Fauquier, Prince William, and Fairfax, all of the Black students from those surrounding areas went to Jenny Dean High School every Monday, and then they would come home on the weekends. And so, yeah, that's the way the world in the early 60s, 50s, obviously. And my parents met while being teachers here in Prince William County.
That's all right. That's awesome. Well, to go to what was Gar-Field like? So you must have gone to high school during disco. I think Carter was president, so we were in relative peace. But I guess it was a time of inflation, I believe. So what was Gar-Field High School like in the mid to late 70s?
It was, it was terrific. It was well integrated. There was kids of all colors and races, predominantly white, I would imagine, probably 85%. But we felt like there were certainly enough brown and Black faces and Asian and Hispanic. I mean, we had a nice cultural mix, I think, at the school, and we all felt like we were on a level playing field. I never felt any kind of way about attending a school that was predominantly white. I felt like I fit in. The neighborhood I grew up in Dale City was that way as well. I didn't really know anything different. Our team was great, as I said. Our track team, the boys were equally good, and we just I enjoyed school. My dad was my guidance counselor, so he challenged me with really heavy duty courses all the time, lots of math and science, because that was his undergrad major. So I ended up majoring in engineering at Tennessee, because I tell people my dad left me good for nothing much else after taking all of those crazy math and science classes in high school. So I think that in the mid 70s, I think the hallmark for me was just opportunity. My parents were insisting that they availed all of those opportunity to my younger sister and me, so that we could participate in a wide variety of things. And so that's why played the flute and piccolo all the way through. They wanted us to be well-rounded, certainly insisted that we got good grades in school as well, and just prepared me for a great life.
Did you know the basketball players, Othell Wilson and Steve Perry? I mean, they had a great basketball team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They won the state championship while we were there.
Yeah, I was there at that game. I'll never forget that game. So anyway, so you started, I'm sure, dominating the track and field in Virginia. Do you think your development in terms of track would have been different if you were in Fairfax County, or because you're in that DC running club, you're pretty much integrated into that into the track scene?
They pulled the DC Striders pulled the best kids from all the way from the Tidewater area.
Okay.
Rural Virginia, DC, Maryland. So yes, I ended up, because I was, among the elite high school athletes, and particularly track and field, and all of those kids, it was an all-star team, the DC Striders. So, there were really nobody that was good in track and field that I didn't know in these other counties. And so it was really fun to have this team that we got together into my junior year, and then we would see each other at meets all throughout the year. And then we got to get back together after our senior year. I made the U.S. junior national team again, but I also then went to the U.S. championships and got 5th place. And so, that was it. I mean, I felt like I had everything at my disposal. I felt like I had a great high school career, and both academically and from an extracurricular standpoint as well.
I got to find it with you, personality like yourself. You're a positive person. You're going to find a way to make it work and find the right lane for yourself. And speaking of which, how did you end up at the University of Tennessee?
My high school coach, Ruthie Brown, was from Maryville, which is right outside Knoxville. And so every chance she got, she talked about the school, but she also took us to the Tom Black Track Classic every year. The Vol Track Classic every year, which was a high school meet. And we would travel, by van from Dale City, the 8 hours to Knoxville every year. And I would see Terry Crawford, and she would certainly seek me out every year to say hello and sit me down and have a conversation. So I was being stealthily recruited. I don't think there were any NCAA violations being broken at that time, but yeah, I was on her campus, so I guess I was free game for her to talk to me. So by the time it came to my senior year, we were still part of the AIAW and my freshman and sophomore year. So those rules applied from a recruiting standpoint. I could only take 3 visits. And so, and I had to pay, we had to pay for them. The schools couldn't pay. That was a different rule than for the boys. And so my parents couldn't afford to send me all over the country. I had 60 or 70 D1 scholarship offers. And I went to Penn State, to UVA, and to Tennessee. I went to UVA 2 or 3 times a year for track meets, but I think because it was so close to home, I think Tennessee seemed to be more attractive. I was just there on campus Monday and Tuesday for an event around the 50th anniversary of Title IX and the strong role that the Lady Vol program played. We did it right in front of the Pat Summitt statue, and was the former men's and women's athletic directors that were there, some former student athletes, our sports information director. So it was great to go down memory lane and talk about how important the Lady Vol brand was in putting women's sports, and particularly women's collegiate sports, on the map. So I felt like when I chose Tennessee, I chose it for a variety of reasons, but the familiarity definitely, but the women's track program actually was ahead of the Pat Summitt's basketball program at the time. We won the first national championship my sophomore year ever for the Lady Vol program. And I was the first Olympian that was a Lady Vol as well. So Olympic gold medalist, I'm sorry. And so we had a strong tradition of successful women's sports. Before I got there, it burgeoned while I was there. And they had a separate men's and women's athletic department. So they were able to write their own rules and, you know, set their own budgets and decide how they were going to recruit athletes. And I think I must have felt that sense of empowerment when I was there as a recruit. And we, you know, had all of the, you know, Tennessee, I've been on the campus twice in the past 6 months. The first time my daughter is being recruited by their track program. She ended up signing with the University of Maryland, but she loved the school. That campus has anything and everything a student or a student athlete could ask for. And it was very similar back in the, you know, when I chose to go there in '79.
Yeah. Well, so I saw a special about Bernard King. It was a Tennessee basketball legend, him and Ernie Grunfeld.
Yeah, Ernie and Bernie show.
Ernie and Bernie show. You probably caught the, no, you probably just missed it.
Just missed them.
Yeah, but he had a really hard time in Knoxville. And a lot of it might've been, I mean, you're from Prince William County, and there's probably some racial tension, you know, in suburban in Virginia. He was from Brooklyn, I believe, or Bronx. But anyway, he had a hard time in Knoxville adjusting. He felt a lot of tension on campus. And it was very difficult for him. It's very painful special to actually watch, because you could really, the pain that he still talks about that he experienced there. Did you have any sense of that, or were you able to navigate it in a more positive way?
I honestly believe that people like Bernard King were, you know, trailblazers for sure for us. And I realized when I got to Tennessee, there used to have the old Stokely Athletic Center where the basketball team played, that had All-American photos in the hallway. And you could see a stark difference in the late 60s, early 70s, because there were no Black athletes there. And all of a sudden there were pictures of Black athletes in the photographs. And, you know, his time at Tennessee was in the midst of that transition. And so because of him and those that came before me, probably the decade before me, by the time I got to Tennessee, I never felt a thing. There were plenty of African-American students and athletes. In fact, I said I went to Tennessee for the sports as well as academics. I majored in industrial engineering, and they had a very strong minority engineering program. I can't remember what they called it at the time. I think they actually still call it that on the campus. But I, you know, had a whole contingent of African-American students that were going through the same engineering program right along with me, and certainly plenty of Black athletes on campus as well. So I didn't feel singled out. I didn't feel any kind of way. I felt very welcomed and very much at home on campus.
Well, your track career was unbelievable. I was reading up on you, and it said you were an All-American 14 times. So I was trying to figure out, well, there's only 8 track seasons in a 4-year career. So I guess obviously you must have been All-American in multiple events.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
The 100, the hurdles, the 4x1. I don't even remember what else,
yeah.
to be honest. Indoor and outdoor. So you have multiple chances, kind of like swimmers in track and field have an advantage that way.
Yeah. So you mentioned your coach's name at Tennessee. It just slipped my mind. But
Terry Crawford was the head coach.
Terry Crawford. What did you learn from Coach Crawford, and some of the things that you may have used in your career, or at least in your track career, professional career, and also your business career?
I think collectively from my coaches, seeing strong female role models was, I think, first and foremost, that they very much, from Gwen Washington to Coach Brown, Ruthie Brown, to Terry, they very much owned their role, and they took on the very, serious responsibility of not only being a coach, but being a mentor or a coach mentor. And sometimes today, I think coaches forget that they're nurturing young people, they're nurturing young adults, and they have the responsibility of mentoring them and treating them in such a way that allows them to develop and grow as human beings as well as athletes. And I had coaches that certainly, taught me life lessons, that nurtured my talent and were devoted to helping me be the best that I could be, both on and off the playing field.
Right. Well, so you mentioned earlier that you didn't get a chance to compete in the 1980 Olympics because of the boycott, Soviet Union and Afghan war, I believe at the time. But you'd been to Russia for a track meet earlier. What was the feeling, qualifying for the team and then not being able to go to the Olympics? I'm sure that when you think about the Russian athletes now that can't compete in some events because of the war in Ukraine, what is your feeling about how geopolitics affects sports and athletes?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think the circumstances have to be considered when determining what's fair and not fair to the athletes. In the case of this just wholesale boycotting of championships because of some geopolitical concerns, I think the Biden administration probably took a softer approach by having more of a diplomatic boycott and not allowing their president, vice president, Secretary of State, none of the cabinet members from his administration to attend the Beijing Olympics a few months ago. And it was much better situation. They certainly considered a wholesale boycott, but understood that the only people that are victims there are the athletes who've trained so hard. And I kind of wish that philosophy were in place when we were back in the 1980 Olympics and we could have competed. So I understand that. I also understand that when you have state-sponsored cheating happening, and it's been certainly proven that the Russian government was doing that, then you can't trust that the athletes that are competing on a level playing field. And so that's where the difference, I believe, lies. And so I don't say it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that people are trying to, I think, take the best approach to ensure fair and equitable competition. So it was a tough time. I mean, we wanted to be in Moscow. We wanted to compete. We had made the Olympic team. We wanted to go. The good news is that when we were at the Olympic trials, the boycott had already been announced. And so we didn't make the team with the expectation of going. Certainly hoped that something might change. Athletes were in Washington on a consistent basis, lobbying to have that boycott overturned, and it certainly didn't happen. Thankfully for me, of the 3 hurdlers that made the team in 1980, I was the only one to make the team again in 1984. So unfortunately for the other 2, Candy Young and Stephanie Hightower, they were unable to compete in 1984. So I feel especially blessed to have had a second chance.
And you were probably still in college yet, so you probably
I was.
You probably weren't at the peak of your powers quite yet, but you probably had a couple more years of growth athletically, probably, huh?
Yeah, I still competed till 1988. I had gotten an injury and had surgery the year before and came back late, right before the Olympic trials, maybe a month or 2. And I hit a hurdle at the 10th hurdle right before the finish line, and I stumbled across the line and missed making the team by 100th of a second after winning the race in every round. And so it was just that little, split second that training or just not being quite on top of my game, but powering through those obstacles regardless. And one of them just jumped up and caught my knee. So that was a disappointing time as well. So bookends of my Olympic triumph was 2 major disappointments for me.
Well, one amazing moment must have been your gold medal in the Pan American Games in 1983. Where were those games? And maybe describe
Caracas, Venezuela.
Oh, cool. So maybe describe those moments to us. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience as well. We went to the dorms and found out that they hadn't been sheetrocked, and all of the accoutrements weren't in place. They were kind of a bed and a sink and community shower, and that's about it. And the food was not to our liking in the village. And so the US team thankfully had the resources to reserve hotel rooms for the athletes. So a couple of days before each of our competitions, we got to leave the village and move into more suitable accommodations and eat great food in the hotel and get ourselves and our energy up to compete well. So my coach actually was the coach of the Pan Am team that year. And so, she took especially good care of us. And so I was able to win the gold medal in the Pan American Games and set me up for a great event in 84.
Yeah, so you had to be really excited. The Olympics were coming. Were you working? Were you focusing on track full time at the time? Yeah.
Yes, at that time I was still finishing up school.
Okay, and so you make the Olympic team that's going to go to the Los Angeles Olympics, but again, now this time the Russians and I guess at the time the East Germans boycotted those Olympics. So that had to be a little bit disappointing, or did those Eastern European countries not have a lot of sprinters?
They had definitely had sprinters, but those women were doping, and so for us it was a relief not to have to compete against athletes who were cheating. And certainly that has all proven out in subsequent years as those athletes have admitted to doping. There was many an investigation about it. This is not me casting aspersions on anybody. And there were more athletes competing in the 1984 Olympic Games than had ever competed in an Olympic Games before. Some of the biggest teams in the world, China and some of the Eastern European countries continued, Romania and many others decided to go ahead and not honor the boycott. And so maybe Russia wasn't there in East Germany, but more countries than ever before were competing, and more athletes than ever before competed at the Los Angeles Games. So we didn't feel like there was anything second class about those games. We felt like we were competing against the best in the world on a fair and level playing field.
Well, and you certainly had to beat a great hurler in Shirley Strong, who I believe was the favorite coming in. Did you know her? And I was reading up on her a little bit. I guess she was quite a character.
Yeah, she was. I did know her, and the year before at the World Championships, it was the first ever World Championships in track and field. She beat me in the finals. I made the finals, and it was the end of a pretty long season. I had been a collegiate athlete still that year, so I ran indoor and outdoor, and then the summer European season and ended up there. It was kind of before people understood this idea of periodization for training and competition. So I just was going all out for 9 months. And by the time I got to those finals, I was pretty exhausted. So I got 8th place, and she beat me by a few places. And after we competed and we sat down next to each other after the race, putting our sweats back on, she pulled out a cigarette and started smoking. And I thought to myself, she just kicked my butt and she's a smoker. I thought to myself, she's never going to beat me again. I just made a vow to myself in that moment. And so when we were running the finals at the Olympics a year later, it was really because of that vow I had taken that was kind of behind in my back of my head the whole time. And so after the semifinal race, which was just a couple hours before the final, I saw her again sitting next to the fence smoking a cigarette, and it reminded me of that vow I had taken. And so when we were in that race, we were kind of neck and neck, hurdle 7 or 8. And I said, not today, Shirley. And I found an extra gear and I beat her by 400ths of a second.
Was she gracious after you beat her?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she was gracious. She never beat me again either.
Yeah. It just goes to show you athletes, you shouldn't smoke. Benita will take it out on you, or someone just like her. So what kind of celebrity does being an Olympic gold medalist bring in? Now, in this day and age, with social media and, ESPN, we are bombarded by sports. On the other hand, there's a lot more sports to compete with. I mean, track and field was enormous back then.
Yeah.
And probably bigger than it is now. What kind of celebrity did it bring you?
I think locally here in the DC area, certainly a certain amount of celebrity, hence the street. And, there was a parade in my honor after I brought home the gold. And so, lots of articles and still like this podcast today. In Europe, we were very, very popular. I still get fan mail from European fans on a pretty regular basis. And when I was working with USA Track and Field several years ago, and I would go overseas with the track team, I would still have fans, following us and going into the hotels where they knew Team USA was staying with photographs of me. Will you please sign? So we had much more popularity in Europe than we did here in the United States. Track and field was on TV every single weekend back then. All of the big indoor meets, they had a series of outdoor track meets that were televised. And so, many of us household names, but at the same time, I was in the same era with Carl Lewis and Jackie Joyner-Kersee and Flojo. And so because they, Edwin Moses, they were the most popular athletes. Evelyn Ashford, I mean, I could go on.
Yeah,
and they were perennially, the best in the world. And so they garnered the most attention and notoriety as a result. But I call my gold medal the gift that keeps on giving. I have no regrets at all. Every opportunity I've ever had career-wise, even meeting my husband, we have two great kids, wouldn't have happened had I not won that gold medal. And so I'm forever grateful for that. Whether I'm on a Wheaties box or not kind of doesn't matter. It's more how it's enriched my life overall.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can only imagine the feeling. So what did you do between the Olympics? I know you didn't make the Olympic team because you hit that last hurdle. But those 4 years, did you work or did you focus on your track?
Yeah, I did both. I was very happy to have graduated with an industrial engineering degree also in 1984. And so my coaches, both the men's and women's coach at Tennessee, went to take head coaching jobs at the University of Texas. And so I was married to a previous person at the time. And so we moved down to Texas to train with our coaches down there. And so I had just graduated with an engineering degree and I didn't want it to go stale, knowing I was anticipating that I was going to retire after the 88 Olympic Games. People didn't have as long careers. My era was the first time people ran multiple Olympic Games, and Carl and Jackie and Edwin and those guys actually continued to run till 1996, and I retired in 88. So I had a lot more years in me. I just decided to transition to a more professional career. I worked part-time as an engineer while I was competing prior to the 88 games. And so I worked for a company called Tracor Aerospace. And so that was a great thing. There was a thing called the Olympic Job Opportunities Program. So they would pay you full-time where you work part-time. I worked probably 2/3 time and got paid full-time as an engineer for the 4 years that I was still competing.
You mentioned some of the other icons of that era. Edwin Moses is definitely a hero to mine. But all those, like we all watched him all the time. Did you have close relationships with them, and did you maintain those relationships through the years?
Absolutely, yeah. Edwin, he was my boss for
Really
4 years. I was the CEO of Laurea's Sport for Good Foundation. He was the board chair.
Oh wow!
And so yeah, I was just on the phone with him a couple of days ago. He saw. I guess now it's a couple of weeks. He saw the post I did on LinkedIn about my daughter's signing with Maryland. And so he had to call and congratulate us. So yeah, I talked to Edwin. Jackie and I have, do events together a lot. And she's terrific. Carl and I see each other every once in a while, probably closer to his sister Carol. But yeah, whenever we see each other, it's just like no time has passed at all.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's interesting and in some ways a little bit unfortunate, but you're prepared for it, is that even athletes who made money, like in the NFL or NBA players at that time, they had to work. They didn't make the kind of money where they never had to work again at that day. And track and field was even different. I mean, there were some professional athletes who made some good money in track, but still, you had to work. You've had a long career as an executive. Do you ever look at the opportunities that athletes have today, even track athletes, with the endorsements and all the sponsorships, all the things they can do? How does it make you feel? I mean, I know it makes you're proud of the young sisters that can do those kind of things, but does it make you feel a little regret that you didn't have those opportunities?
Probably, but I wouldn't change my life for the world.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. I don't want any other husband, no other kids, the career that I've had off the track has been very rewarding.
Yeah.
Mostly working in the nonprofit space after I worked as an engineer for a short period of time, but worked for Special Olympics, the Atlanta Organizing Committee. I worked for the US Olympic Committee twice. I've been a CEO, senior executive, and currently working for League Apps, which is a youth sports management technology platform where clubs and tournaments and leagues run and do payments and registration and communicate with their coaches and members and do scheduling and all those kinds of things that you need to run a youth sports program. And so it's a startup thing, and it's fun and exciting. We've doubled in size in the past year and a half since I've been their VP of Community and Impact. So that's my most recent role. I came here after being CEO of Laureus USA. I was the COO of the United States Olympic Committee. I ran the high performance program as chief of sport for USA Track and Field for 4 years. I ran a women's cable industry organization called Women in Cable for 8 years as CEO. So yeah, it's been a nice transition out of track and field, but for the most part, other than that stint in the cable industry, I've been working in sport as an administrator and executive, which, that's my first love. And many times it's an opportunity to help other kids and have the opportunity to either, compete and participate in the first place, or in the case of the USOC and USA Track and Field, helping them reach the pinnacle of success.
That's an amazing legacy you're continuing to build. When you think about how your track career and how you trained, is the training much different for the athletes of today? And do you think you would have been any different of an athlete today than you were when you competed?
I definitely would have been a different athlete. A couple things I know. What I noticed as a shift years and years ago, probably when my son was competing, but definitely when my daughter started competing. They're about 5 years apart. And my son's a senior at Morehouse College. he's a first semester senior, so he'll graduate in December. My daughter is a senior in high school. As I mentioned, she's going off to college at Maryland in the fall. And especially for her, seeing her early track coaches, they were doing things with 9 and 10-year-olds that I did in college.
Wow.
And so a lot of the training techniques that were kind of new and burgeoning at the time that I was competing are now, routine, and, youth track and field coaches are implementing them. A lot more weights, a lot more technology is being used, a lot better training programs are developed. There's very much a science to the physiology that they are, the biomechanics, the physiology that they are applying that helps to work different energy systems at different times and helps you peak at the right time when you're and even in high school. And so it's well beyond me. In many cases, they're also lifting weights much more consistently. My daughter has lifted. She was a volleyball player, so most of high school. So she just started really focusing on track in the last year and has made some really great strides. And so seeing that change and seeing her club coach and her high school coach and the training she does, it's way beyond whatever I did in high school.
Yeah. What kind of sports parent are you? I know, with your record, it would be easy to be demanding, but obviously you don't want to discourage your kids, because if they have to try to be a gold medalist, they'll never start anything.
Yeah.
But what was your journey like as a sports parent?
It's been fun. I'm sad to see it come to a close with her graduation. But what we try to do is be there for them. My husband coached my son in basketball for several years until he got to high school, and then he was playing with different AAU clubs along with the high school. But so he was able to nurture him and be that coach mentor / father figure in his life, and ensure he got the right training and support and encouragement during those more formative years. With Maya, I took a step back because of that shadow that I cast on her. And so it's been a tough balancing act to ensure that I'm there for her and able to give her that support and encouragement, advice when needed, but without having her feel like she's got to live up to something that I'd done. She can chart her own path.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, look, Benita, this has been amazing to talk to you. I mean, your answers are so thoughtful, and I learned a lot about Prince William County and about track and field. So this has been great. I'm glad Rob Uzio, who I went to high school with, he recommended that I get in touch with you. He just thinks the world of you. And so I'm really glad that he recommended that we talk. And I'm glad you took time to do this, because I love to bring exposure to our heroes of the area. We have a lot of great athletes like yourself, and it's just been great talking to you. And I am excited to expose you to a new generation of track athletes who may not even know you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So look, have a great day and good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yep.